evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Skeptic. Welcome to the Scares. Tonight's flick is a surprisingly well-received, low-budget horror flick. It's about a deaf woman who's being stalked by a killer in her own home. Surprisingly simple. This is Hush. Directed by Mike Flanagan, who's behind these lovely titles. Not too shabby of a resume. Even Stephen King wrote, "How good is Hush? Up there with Halloween and even more, Wait Until Dawn. White Knuckle Time? On Netflix." Maybe he just liked his books referenced in the film. Even William Friedkin, director of The Exorcist, also commented on the film, saying Hush is a great horror film. On Netflix. Terrifying. Nice. This is your fair warning now. This is an analytical video dissecting the method of horror in movie scenes. So, there will be spoilers. You've been warned. We see our main character, Maddie, a deaf woman who is working on her second novel in a house in the middle of nowhere. A house that nice on a single book deal? Yeah, okay. She's been deaf since the age of 13 because of a meningitis infection, and how that ties into anything, I'm not really sure, but she does describe her writing process as hearing a voice in her head, essentially talking to herself. This especially helps when considering multiple endings for her book. Her neighbor Sarah comes to visit, which establishes how Maddie communicates through her handicap, setting up later scenarios. And we have a kitty. Aww. We also establish her alarm system. At least in this case, where many modern horror films have large quiet houses as settings where the characters never play music or have the TV on in the background, at least now the silence makes sense. Later that night, Sarah runs to Maddie's, bloodied and screaming for help, but uh-oh, she can't hear her. The killer brutalizes her, wearing a melted old man face. It takes some time to realize Maddie can't hear him, looking all "da fuck." He uses this opportunity to steal her phone, takes pictures of her, and sends them. He also slashes her tires and cuts the power. Even when she writes him a message that she hasn't seen his face, therefore there's no reason to harm her, he goes on ahead and reveals his face anyway. He ain't shy. And he's a pretty average looking guy. The rest of the film, you guessed it, is this cat and mouse game of survival. I realize that's simplifying it, but that is the gist. He circles the house, toying with her, and winds up shooting at her with a crossbow during an escape attempt. She now has a limited time before she bleeds out, creating a sense of urgency to push the story forward. Sarah's BF John comes around and the killer poses as a cop surprisingly well.
Yeah, I got a 719 here at 811 Fairhope. Signs of possible forced entry. Suspect is at large on foot.
But John sees through it by seeing Sarah's earring on the ground. But before he can end the film, Maddie fucks it up. Another note, she messages another man named Craig in the beginning of the film, but he never ties in later to the plot. It's almost like the screenwriter forgot to write him in. Oops. She uses her writing method to think through the different scenarios of escape, realizing that they all end in her demise. So, she determines she needs to kill the mofo. She does manage to shoot him back, which in turn he crushes her hand, and now they both have a limited time. She challenges him to come and get her and intelligently writes a description of the killer on her laptop to be found after her death.
Clever girl.
She hides at the bathroom and doesn't notice the killer entering from above, reaffirming her disadvantage in the situation with her hearing impairment. But his mocking comment breathes out onto her neck and gives her the upper hand. In the final scene, she manages to blind him with insecticide, disorients him with a loud alarm, thereby he shares her disadvantage, and in the final struggle, her life flashes before her eyes before she gets him with a corkscrew. And the film ends with her barely alive to meet the cops. Even Kitty shows up alive.
You done good, Beanpole.
Overall, a thrilling life and death situation with a unique twist of not being able to hear your impending doom approaching. The film does seem to drag for the running time, but it's directed effectively enough to make it thrilling the whole way through. But with all that said, now my darlings, which scenes scared you most? If I had to admit what terrified me the most, it's discovering a murder happened near me without me the wiser. To be blind to a similar fate approaching me ever closer. Brutal and unexpected, this inciting incident comes out of nowhere, which speaks volumes for the nature of the killer. Plus it comes down to poor timing and bad luck. The door was locked while the other one wasn't? Should've kept trying, Sarah. All the scare took was a glass door between the two characters. I'm actually kinda ticked off how simple the setup was to be so effective. This is a classic Stalker scenario, but it always gets to me. Similar to the previous scare, you have no idea if your death is near or if you even have a psychopath watching you. Again, it's as simple as someone sending you photos of yourself and having the sickening feeling of realizing you're being watched. Not not outright scary, but it builds the dread and suspense for what's to come. So this killer isn't anything special. He's got a mask that hasn't had enough sleep, but his blank face is a little creepy. We'll give that a check mark. And he's got a knife and a crossbow. Interesting choice, but seen that. But that's what's so unnerving. I personally would have liked to have kept the mask on till the end of the film to cover his expressions and emphasize how much of an unempathetic monster he is. But revealing his face does tell us that he's an average looking guy that you'd probably never guess as a killer, like some of reality's most famous killers. A few creepy things he does, however, is how he casually kills Sarah, almost looking sexual, but also uncaringly. We see early on what he's capable of. He then reveals his face, even though she mentions, "Haven't seen your face, won't tell," because it's all a game to him. He doesn't give a darn.
I can come in anytime I want. And I can get you anytime I want.
He circles the house like a shark. His face can appear wherever like a Michael Myers type. He even uses her dead friend to tap at the glass. Dick move. Worst of all isn't what he does, but what she discovers. She finds tally marks on his crossbow, clarifying the stakes that she's up against, and that her chances of survival are low. The biggest element that makes the whole movie is the dynamic of her inability to hear. This adds a whole new dimension of possibilities that they take full advantage of. It's why she can't hear her friend die, or even know where the killer is hiding. The disadvantage makes for a thrilling ride. This is a large hump for the character to come over, and it's something I've never really seen in another horror movie before. A simple detail like this really adds a lot to a movie idea. I mean, what if the character was blind? Oh, right. What starts as a weakness becomes a satisfying twist when she fights back and delivers the same disadvantage to the killer. Beautiful. It allows for scares like the bathroom scene, which wouldn't have worked otherwise. So if there's any takeaway from the creativity of this film, it's to have a new simple setup that allows for new possibilities that makes old scares even scarier.
After everything is set up, we get the occasional scene of your stomach sinking or your skin crawling, but as Maddie becomes more determined to fight, the movie becomes less scary and more about us rooting for her to fight. Which is not a bad thing by any means, but if you're looking for a film that's going to stir you, this could, but only for so long. So join us next time as we continue our journey to discover horror and film. The next one ought to be a doozy. So take care, and pleasant dreams.